Hey guys, welcome to the stream. Just messing around with a few things, so before we get started, I kind of need to get this browser working, and which is fine because I can wait for a few of you to get in the actual stream. Let's see if this actually works. Alright. So I'm just checking to see if the live reload works on the browser. Because apparently I wasn't able to get it to work with a normal Chrome browser. So I had to directly embed it in OBS, so not sure if it will update like Chrome does. It looks like it's not actually updating. That's really annoying. Let's see. Yep, no, it's not going to work. I'm going to have to do this from the terminal. It's not a big deal though. It's just kind of sad that I can't use the debugger directly inside of Chrome for this. Whatever. I'll explain what it is and all that stuff so that you guys know it actually exists. But yeah. Alright, so we're looking at Flutter Web today, aka Hummingbird, which was released, I think, 2 days ago. This is a technical alpha, technically, so it's technical preview build. Everything is subject to change, and that's why I didn't really want to do like a formal tutorial on it, because yeah, that'd be a waste of time, since the APIs are probably going to change, the way that you do everything is probably going to change and all that. So in front of us I have an application that I built a while ago for one of our tutorials, and this has been actually converted over to Flutter Web from Flutter. You can see up here the imports are not actually Flutter, they're Flutter Web instead. Let's see if I can get it running in a browser so that you guys can actually see it working. Alright, so I'm running it from the command line for this one instead of using F5. Hey guys, how you doing? We won't be doing desktop embedding today. I mean, that still is a thing, but it's a lot more complicated than any of this. No, the Flutter API, like the normal Flutter API, is not going to change that much anymore. I mean, of course, they're going to add new features and stuff. The API is more or less stabilized. This here is entirely different because it's the web connection, basically. So, oh, cool. Frederick's from Sweden. That's right on. Yeah, I get a lot of Europeans in here, even at this time of the day. So let's see. Let me open this in Firefox. See if I can get it to work inside of OBS. Hang on a second. So this is going to look a little strange. If you guys can see it, probably can't. Let me... let's see. Let's make it 400 by 600. Alrighty, so let me put that on the screen. Alright, let's see. Can I actually interact with that thing? I guess not. It is, after all, built directly in there. Let's see if it changes when I update it, though. Okay, looks like I'm going to have to use Firefox instead. It's fine. Let's remove this. Let's get a Firefox window to put in here. Sorry guys, I know this is a little bit tedious. I just, you know, it is a new technology, so I'm trying to get everything working. Unfortunately, I didn't do this last night because I didn't really think about it, and I probably should have. All right. This is annoying. I can't. There we go. That looks decent. Let's make it much smaller so that it actually looks sort of like the emulator. There we go. You guys can see that now, right? Just a little animation. This is the spring physics animation that we built in one of the tutorials way back when. So let's see if I can change the colors. So it should be cayenne now. Let's change this to something else entirely. So purple. And I don't know why I used the release compiler, but whatever, it'll take a little bit longer. Alright, apparently it's compiled. Let's see. Alright, so I'm going to have to reload it like that. Did that show up? Yeah, okay. Alright, so that works, sort of. So when you run a Flutter Web... Hang on, my cat's throwing up behind me. Alright, sorry about that. So when you run a Flutter Web application, currently there's no hot reloading, but it will launch a Chrome browser, and the Chrome browser will be connected through a WebSocket. And then if you enable hot restarting on save, then you will get a sort of stateless hot reload in the browser. So it's sort of like working with the emulator. I guess the main difference is that it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't keep the state of the application. So, but you can also, like I'm doing right now, you can also run it from the command line. And when you do that, you have to manually reload the browser, which is kind of a pain, but that's what we're going to have to do because apparently I can't get the browser to start without hardware acceleration, and then OBS doesn't want to work with it properly. So anyway, at least know that that's a thing. So if you're working with Visual Studio Code, you can hit F5 like you would with any other Flutter app, and it will actually open up properly in a browser and you can mess around with it. Alright, so let's actually get into our own application here. So let me bring up the documentation and we can take a look at that. So this this documentation was released the other day. So this is the actual Flutter website, and then they've got the GitHub repository for Flutter Web over here. And this has a lot of different instructions that you can follow to set it up. Specifically, if you go all the way to the bottom down here, there's a migration guide. And this will help you take an existing Flutter application and convert it over to Flutter Web. Though I have noticed that there are a few minor errors here, and we'll take a look at those. I'll probably have to send in a pull request, help them correct the documentation, because they're missing a line here. Anyway, so I've only really looked at this just briefly, so we're kind of looking at this for the first time together. So we'll see how that works out. Yeah, no Rust today. I just wanted to rush and do some Flutter Web because that was just released. Neelish says, thanks for beginning beta early. Yeah, I guess. It's just really the only time I had. All right, so let me get back over into the text editor and let's open a, and actually I think I'm gonna go and clone some kind of GitHub repository for a application that we've already written. So I just want to see how this handles a larger application than what I just was running. So let's I think so. I've got this. I think a decent one would be this one, the block tutorial video. This is like a movie searcher. It like goes out to an API, pulls in a bunch of like movies and stuff, and it does it through a block. And I kind of want to see how that works with Flutter Web. So let's go ahead and just clone this over, and then we'll bring it into the browser. Let me get you guys over to my terminal emulator so you can see what's going on. Alright, so clear that, get out of there, and let's clone this. And what's it called? Flutter block tutorial. Alright. Let's open it up in code. Actually, I got to do this manually so I don't break it from the screen. I'll get you guys over there. Alright. So, I'm going to need to add the API key here, but that's not a big deal. Alright, so first we're going to need to modify the PubSpec YAML to make this work. So currently the Flutter Web API is not integrated with Flutter. So we need to remove anything that has to do with Flutter inside of this file right now. Because obviously Flutter only works with Android and iOS, and Flutter Web is what we want. So we want to remove the Flutter SDK here and the Cupertino icons as well. And we also want to remove the Flutter test stuff, and I guess all this too needs to go. There is a different way of referencing assets. Not sure if I'll go over that today though. So alright, so we've removed all that. If we go back to the web page, let me why are you guys not seeing what I'm seeing? Hang on. Oh, wrong window, that's why. Alright, so I've removed all of the dependencies here, you can see. Let me just go back so you can actually see what I removed. So I took out Flutter SDK here, the Cupertino icons, Flutter test, and all of this stuff here. I guess you don't really need to remove the comments, but you want to remove Flutter test and then the Flutter key at the bottom. So then if we go back over to the browser, we can look at the migration guide here, and you can see they have some dependencies that we want to add. So we want to add Flutter Web, And there's another one here. It's going to be called Flutter Web UI, which we also need to add. Let me, so it'll look like that. Both of them can be any because we're going to be manually overriding where they're located and pointing them directly towards the GitHub repositories. We also need, if we want testing, we can bring in Flutter Web Test as well, and then the test repository like this. But we're also going to need the build runner and build web compilers in the dev dependencies. And then, like I mentioned before, we need to override the paths for these two and point them towards their GitHub repositories. So dependency overrides. And we've got paths right here. You can also use a local path if you want. If you install the Flutter Web GitHub repository locally, you can directly reference it in here as well. And once you've done this, you can go ahead and save it, and Flutter Dart tool, or whatever it's called, Dart code, should go and get the dependencies for you. So I checked the output of Flutter Web. If you do the debug build, it's pretty large, but if you go ahead and you use the release compilers, which I'll show you here in a moment, it's not large at all. It's actually pretty small, which is pretty impressive. I'm going to show you guys the performance here and how it really differs, because that's something I'm curious about as well. Hey, Mohammed. Sorry, I can't really read Arabic, so I have no idea what you're saying. All right. So, of course, this will break all of our dependencies in our project that refer to Flutter, so we need to change these to Flutter Web. And they're the same library, so Flutter Web material, and then there's Flutter Web widgets in this case. And you can see that just fixes everything. Now, while I'm doing this, I'm going to put in my API key. I guess I don't really care if you guys see this. So it's my API key for the API here. So this application, it brings in movies from the moviedb.org, and just makes a list of them. All right, so let's see. Is there anything else we need to do? We're probably going to need to update RxDart. Also, you should know that any libraries that directly reference the Flutter SDK, that is, depend on the Flutter SDK, are not going to work with Flutter Web. So if you're going to try and use like Flare right now, Flare will not work with Flutter Web. And obviously that's going to change over time, but yeah, because this is a technical alpha build, it's, you know, it's got a lot of gotchas in there. Can you guys not see what I'm typing? Gosh, this is not actually loading properly. Hang on. There we go. All right, can you actually see me moving around the screen? Apparently you can. Okay, let me go back over what I was talking about, because apparently OBS is being a pain. So I put in all the dependencies here. Probably going to need to update RxDart. Got these overrides down here to point Flutter Web towards the Git repository, and the Flutter Web UI towards its Git repository as well. These are directly copied and pasted from that document that we were seeing before in the browser. Then inside of our application here, anything that references Flutter, we need to change to Flutter Web. So here we're importing the package material, and I've changed it to Flutter Web rather than Flutter. And of course, you can see we still have the same widgets that you would get in Flutter in this particular APK as well. And I did the same over here for widgets. This is for the provider for this application. I've called it Flutter Web as well. We've got a block in this application, and as I was saying before, the application goes out to the movie DB and it just gets movies as the user's typing in like a query. So it's nothing too complicated, but it's a bit of a bigger app than the other one that we were looking at. Is everything working or is it not working? Looks like it's working to me. Apparently it's not working. Maybe I need to restart OBS. This is really annoying. Alright. Give me a second, guys. I'm gonna do some editing here, see if I can fix all this garbage. Alright, let's see. Yeah, no, it's not working. Like if I scroll up and down, I can't see it changing inside of OBS, so I'm gonna need to restart the stream, which is unfortunate. I'll be right back, guys. It should take a second. Alright, it looks like I should be back. I don't know if you guys can hear me yet. Let me know if you can hear me. But it looks like it should be working now. Alright, so I've got confirmation that stream is back up and that everything is working. I'm sorry about all these technical errors. I guess this is a result of trying to do everything live like this. Alright, regardless, we've modified this application to Flutter Web. I don't know how much you guys saw and how much you didn't see. But I guess I can go over everything once again real quick. So in the PubSpec YAML here, we've changed dependencies, added Flutter Web, Flutter Web UI, removed anything that related to the original Flutter SDK. For dev dependencies, added build runner, build web compilers, and test. And then we also added these overrides. You can get all this information from the Git repository that I showed you before, and I'll link that in the description of the stream later. Then inside of your application, anything that references Flutter needs to be changed to Flutter Web. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So here we've got Flutter Web Material, and that used to be Flutter Material. And then for the provider, we have Flutter Web Widgets, which is now Flutter Web, or which used to be Flutter Widgets instead. All right, but this is not all we have to do. We also need to create a web folder. And in that web folder, we need an index.html and then a main.dart file. So you can kind of think of this folder as sort of like the Android folder or the iOS folder. In the case of like the Android folder, for instance, you've got this like main activity, and essentially this is just a place where we're embedding the Flutter view. So it's being embedded directly into Android. So in the same way that we do that with Android, we're doing this with the web, which of course means that we need to use HTML, and we can also use Dart. So we're going to use the Dart to basically mount our program from our quote-unquote Flutter Web onto this piece of HTML. And let me go and actually get the HTML. It's pretty basic here. It's just a simple document that references main.dart.js, which is what this will be called when it gets compiled into, or rather transpiled into JavaScript. Let's give it a title. I'm just going to call it like movie searcher. Then in the main.dart file, there's a bunch of boilerplate that we can bring in as well. And again, this is on that GitHub document that I showed you before. So you import the Flutter Web UI. This is what it's actually for. And then we need to import our actual package, which I think is called block example. And then we're going to need to bring in main.dart like that. And so this gets references, this gets aliased as app, and it calls to our main function. And we use the UI here to basically initialize Flutter to run on the web platform. Is everybody following this? Got some people from India, right on. Yeah, Neelish, I'm not going to check that, unfortunately. But I'm sure it worked out. I'll check it after the stream, probably. Alright, perfect, perfect. Alright, everybody's in the same position now. Seems like the errors from before are not causing any problems. Alright, so at this point, if we were just normally working by ourselves, we'd hit F5, and that would bring up the normal debug stuff. And actually, there is some setup here, so let me show you how to do that. There's a website you can go to help you set it up. Let's see. There we go. So that works. So here in the Dart code website, which of course is the plugin that we're using in Visual Studio Code, they've got instructions to actually setting this up properly. So here you can choose. You can actually choose to build a new web project, which we'll do later, but you can choose the environment that you want to build it in. We're going to build it in Chrome. When you hit F5 to debug it, it'll automatically launch a Chrome window. And of course, it also mentions here that there's no stateful hot reloading. So instead of hot reload on save, you want hot restart on save. So you can go ahead and change that in your workplace settings. I wouldn't do it in your user settings because it'd mess up your normal Flutter stuff if you're running just a normal Flutter app. You also want to make sure you're not connecting to ABD. You know, you can turn this off. That way you're just not throwing out random processes that you don't need. And then, yeah, and the rest of the workflow is basically the same as you'd expect with Flutter. So there are a few little caveats down here that you can go through. But again, I'll link this in the description. Actually, I'll link it into the chat right now so you guys can read it if you want to. So there's that. And then here is the migration guide if you guys want to take a look at that as well. Okay, so let's get this running now. I'm going to do this from the terminal instead of working with the Visual Studio Code built-in stuff because it's just not working with OBS, unfortunately. So let's go over to the terminal here. And there are a few things that you do want to set up before you try to do any of this. So first we do need to run Flutter packages upgrade to get all the dependencies and see if they're compatible with one another. And yeah, because obviously we've changed everything from Flutter to Flutter Web. And as you can see here, we're actually getting, no, these are not errors. So this is just pulling in from Git. It's red for some reason. I don't know. I suspect that when I do compile this, RxDart is going to have some issues. So let's go back real quick and just change it. So I think RxDart's current version is like 22.0. I could check that real quick. Yes, it is. All right, so let's just save that, and then we'll go back to our terminal. And to run the application, we're going to need to get WebDev, which is the tool that you would use to build any client-side application inside of Dart. So, but you do want to install it in your Flutter SDK. So you can do this by running Flutter packages pub global activate WebDev rather than just pub global activate WebDev. If you have the Dart dev version, you can just run pub global activate WebDev, because I think the Dart dev version is 2.3 and you need Dart 2.3, I believe. So anyway, I'm going to run this real quick. I've already run it, obviously, because as you guys saw, I was able to build an application. But it's not a problem. If you do run this again, you've already got it installed in your computer, it'll just go ahead and update it if there is an update, or it'll just check to see if it's installed and then tell you that it's installed. So there we go. We've installed it. Let me clear this. And then it's just a matter of using WebDev to then serve the project. So just WebDev serve. And if you want to use the release compiler, you can just pass -r to WebDev serve. But for now, let's just use the normal serve and see if this actually works. All right, so is it Keon? He's saying that you don't need 2.3, so you can use 2.1 apparently. All right, so I guessed wrong with that, but I do know that I was using the Dart stable build yesterday when I was first checking it out, and I wasn't able to use WebDev serve directly from my Dart SDK. I had to run it through my Flutter SDK. So just make sure to update your Dart SDK, and if you do that, it should work like we're doing it right now. So you can see here it's going ahead and it's building everything. It's actually taking all of your project and compiling it into JavaScript, or rather transpiling it into JavaScript and HTML. And let's wait for this to actually finish. Once it's finished, it's actually pretty quick to reload, or rather restart. But it can take about a minute or two to actually get up there, which it in fact did. So now we can go to localhost 8080 and open our project. So let's see. Let me bring this into view. All right, there we go. That is obviously the wrong app, but let me reload it. Let's close all this. There we go. Now it's actually reloading. Let's see, do you guys see it? Let me make it bigger while we're at it. There we go. So, looks like it's working. So currently this app, it doesn't have any kind of landing page, but we can start to type into the search box here, and it'll go and ping on the API for us. Bring in a list of movies, which is kind of cool. Looks like we've got an error here. Let's see what that's coming from. Alright, so it looks like that is a result of the images in here. So here, down here, let's just grab all this. We'll embed it directly in here. Like that. Hang on. Don't want the phone ringing. Let's see. Why is this being all strange? All right. I don't know why it's not picking up my $sign here for the string interpolation. That's very odd. Hang on, let's see if I could fix it. There we go, because it's not on the same page. Or, not same page, but same line. And let's remove this. I guess there wasn't another quote. Alright, so wish you guys could actually see my oh god, the windows are all screwed up. Let me fix those real quick. This is really annoying. Let's see. That's very strange. It's not. Oh, there we go. Why is it being annoying? Oh. Let's bring it above. Sorry about this, guys. I don't know why this happened at all, but apparently it did. I wish I could just use the normal settings that I use for when I make a video, but apparently that's not a good way to do things. Alright, so that, I think that fixed that, but let's move this preview over. Oh, that's why. Because apparently I'd moved the preview off the screen and somehow that had screwed everything up. Alright, let's make this a little smaller. And actually, let's do it from the window itself. Alright, anyway, this is really obnoxious, but it looks alright now. Alright, so let's see. So we've got some questions here. Imagine if in half a year you can embed your entire app in the web for people to have a try before you download type feature. That's sort of what we have, but I guess this would be more like having just native apps on the web. Cohen says he's had to use Flutter packages, build, run, build, run, or serve, because Dart was not found by WebDev. Yeah, I guess you'd have to do that if WebDev doesn't work. Though if WebDev doesn't work, then I would just reinstall it and see if that fixes it. And if it doesn't, then you have to probably update your Flutter SDK. It needs to be above version 1.5 from at least what the document says. I'm running currently version 1.58. So if you're on the dev build or if you're on the master channel, those are the two main builds that you probably want to be on. He says no performance or size improvements were done by the Dart team. The initial boot time and load of the websites will be better in the future. That's true, but I will say that using the release compiler will give you a decent amount of performance just out of the box. Pesthuff wonders if it properly integrates with the browser's main scrolling area. Actually, everything gets embedded inside of a canvas, believe it or not. So let me show you what's going on here. So I don't know if you guys can see this. Let's see if I can zoom in. Guess not. So here we've got like normal HTML. There's like a body, but inside of it you've got all these elements that are prefixed with FLT. So let's see. That's just going to screw up my window. Let me put this in its own window. So I'll put it back on the browser. And let's open it in there. Alright, so here's the app. Let's see if you guys can see this a bit better. Hang on, just fixing this real quick so that I don't have to worry about it when we come back to it. Apparently I can't find Visual Studio Code. Oh, there we go. So anyway, we've got we've got all these weird Flutter elements which are being created using these FLT prefixes, and then inside of them there's like a canvas here, FLT canvas, and then like an actual web canvas. Everything that's being rendered here seems to be being built inside of the canvas itself. So if I try to like use the inspector to select an individual element, it won't actually let me do that. And then below all of this we have a bunch of actual HTML elements. So these are where I guess all of the pieces of the app are being built. Let me reload this. So it's almost like everything's being built in the canvas, and then below it you've got the actual HTML that's being built out for the application, which is pretty interesting. Let's see. Apparently I can't type inside of the box. That's fantastic. Yeah, so it seems to render to a canvas. It still has the HTML elements for interaction and accessibility. You can go into, you can also use the debugger to change things. And obviously the API is still in flux, so this is not entirely how they're gonna just end it. I think obviously they're going to use Canvas to help with the speed of things, help with animations and stuff like that, and that makes sense. But you've also got below all this HTML, all these divs, for instance, and they've all got a bunch of different CSS applied to them. So, for instance, here's the actual search. It says search for a movie. This would be the text that would be inside of the search box before I actually typed into it. And then here are some of the movies that are appearing. So we've got these P's down here. And apparently some of them repeat, so I'm not really sure how it's working actually. But it seems like it's being rendered down here, and then that's being rendered into the canvas. So here's like a description of one of these, a message in a bottle, which is somewhere here, I guess, at the very bottom. And it looks like it does kind of diff the DOM as well. It's slow because it's in debug mode. It's actually pretty fast in the release compiler. So let me go ahead and set that up. So I'm gonna stop it by running flutter or I'm going to stop it in the command line, and then I'm going to run webdev serve -r, and I'll show you guys the main difference in performance when it reloads. Frankly, I'm not really worried about the whatchamacallit, the performance of it right now, because obviously that's not a priority. They just wanted to get something working out here before, or sooner rather than later. So alright, so here would be the release compiler build. As I type things in, it's much snappier, but it's also just faster in general. If I actually look at the performance, so if I start recording here and then reload everything, it actually reloads within about a half a second, which is pretty decent, especially considering the other one reloads, the debugger reloads in about, I think, 2 seconds. So here you can see it's probably even less than half a second. Reloaded pretty quickly. Now, of course, it's just reloading. It's not loading from start, rather. But we can also look and see, let's see, what am I looking for? I'm not used to the Firefox console here. So here, if you look at the sources, got the actual piece of JavaScript that's being served, and it's only a single piece of JavaScript. Whereas if you're building with a debugger, you'll see all of the libraries for Flutter. So they've got, it seems like they've got some kind of tree shaking algorithm to take pieces out that you don't need for whatever the app is that you're building, which is kind of cool. So all this stuff seems to be working out of the box, and I'm assuming this is just the stuff that was already a part of the Dart2JS compiler, which they're using for this particular build of the Flutter Web. Yeah, I guess that's true. You don't really have to worry about CSS, and I find it interesting that these elements are not really HTML elements. I mean, they're FTL scene host, FTL scene, FTL transform. It sort of reminds me of Polymer. It's almost like they took the Polymer technology that they had depreciated and have now started using it as part of Flutter, which is kind of cool. Alright, so Justine asked if I was using a Logitech 513. My keyboard is a Corsair. My mouse is a Logitech 502. So you were close, I guess. What's the learning curve for Flutter Web? It's exactly the same for Flutter. You're quite literally using the same API. It's just being compiled into JavaScript. There's really no difference here, from what I can tell. But of course, let's go ahead and build an app, because I haven't actually done that yet. So why don't we do that? Instead of just modifying current apps, let's actually build something. So I'm going to go ahead and let's get you guys back into the editor here. I'm going to go ahead and use the command palette, and if you use the command palette, you can I don't know why the chat is so damn big. Hang on. Let's move this over. I'm gonna have to fix all of my layouts. It's not a big deal, but whatever. Anyway, so you can use the command palette, which is Control-Shift-P, and then you can type in Flutter new web project, and this will allow you to generate a Flutter web project. So you don't have to go through all the steps that we went through before to have a new Flutter Web project. So I think what we're going to build here is a calculator, because why not? I think that's pretty simple app, something that we can do pretty quickly, and might as well see what that looks like. Let's see. All right, so you guys aren't looking at the proper window. Hang on, let me close this and reopen it in the other one. So I generated the project. It actually requires stagehand. When you do it, Dart code will ask you to update stagehand, and you can just do it. It'll automatically do it for you, which is kind of cool. Let's see. And there we go. Called it calculator. All right, so you can see here we have no Android, no iOS stuff. Instead, we just have the lib folder and the web folder. And it looks like, yeah. So all this is set up exactly the same as what we had in our other project too. Let's see. So they're not using, it looks like they're not using the normal Flutter project that you would expect to see when you build a Flutter project, the counter app. Instead, they just got this Hello World app, which I guess is reasonable. All right, so let's clear this out. Clear that out. Clear that out. Get rid of that. Just put our build function back in here. I wonder if the auto completion is the same. If it's going to be as... Yeah, it seems to have decent auto completion like Flutter does. Is everything working, guys? Looks like it is. Alright. Just making sure. Alright, so I guess if we're going to build a calculator, let's do this pretty dirty. This is going to be pretty quick and dirty calculator build. Nothing special about it. You know, I actually didn't expect to take so much time fixing so many errors, so hopefully we still have enough time to finish this. Alright, so let's start by, I guess, creating a class here. And I guess we could use the My Homepage class for this. So let's just convert this to a stateful widget. All right. And then I guess we're going to need some variables here. So probably need a string output. Set this equal to 0.00. This will be our screen output. Let's have another string. This will be another output. This will be like the internal string. And I guess we'll set that to nothing. And we'll have a double. This will be num1. And then another double. And actually I can initialize these on the same line. And I guess we're going to need another string. This will be the operation. So this will be like a stack-based calculator, like a normal calculator that you have on like Windows, where you're clicking buttons and then it adds this stuff into it. All right, so for the layout of this thing, do we have a scaffold? I guess we need a scaffold. So let's create that. Actually, maybe we'll put the scaffold outside. So let's wrap this in a new widget. Put this in a container, and then we'll put that container in a scaffold. So something like that. Let's put some commas here, make it vertical. And in the app bar, I guess we'll say, just call this calculator. All right, so we got our scaffold, which is nice. Then down here in the body, probably going to need, I think we'll need an expanded to start with, because we want to expand it the entire screen. Then let's see, let's put a padding in here so that we can have some padding on the top and bottom. And actually, we'll do it all the way around. So I guess like 4.0 should be enough. Excuse me. And actually, no, what am I doing? This needs to be a column. Let's start with a column. Forget the expanded. I don't know what I'm thinking. All right, so column. So we're making a column of buttons, and then of course the column will also have the screen inside of it. So the screen itself will be the padding. And again, like I said before, we want this, and actually we'll use edge insets only. Top, we'll put like a 150 pixel top padding, and then 150 bottom padding. They should be doubles, by the way. And then in this, we'll have a child, which will be our container. Let me spell alignment right. The text in the output, in the actual thing that you're reading the calculations from, we want it to be in the top right, because that's sort of how most calculators look like. We'll have some padding on this container here as well. Let's make it just all 12.0, something like that. And then we'll have a text in here. And the text in here will have our output, which is this here. And we could give it a style, text style, font size of like 50.0, and colors white, something like that. All right, and then below this, we want to have another column. So kind of want to put this inside the padding. I don't know why I had the first column, really. There's really no reason to have that if we're going to be putting all this. No, I'm going to put the column inside the other column. So I don't know why I thought I could put it in the padding. Anyway, don't worry about it. And then this column will just have all the buttons in it, which will be a bunch of rows. So have a row like that, row like that. I guess we'll have like 4 or 5 rows, probably 5. And these will be our rows of buttons. We do want to generate the buttons. We'll generate them with like a function that we can create. So let's leave all this as it is now. So just keep it as empty rows. And I guess we can go ahead and build this, see what it looks like. So I'm just going to go into the terminal and run webdev-serve. You guys aren't going to see that because I just would rather do it really quickly. So, I mean, if you want to learn Flutter, yeah, you could watch my playlist. There are also some decent entry-level tutorials on YouTube from some other content creators as well. I don't know any of them off the top of my head though, but I do know they have some more gentle tutorial series than what I have, because mine just kind of dives into the deep end, and the idea is that you're supposed to kind of pick up these concepts as you're working. But I guess some people can't do that. Some people have asked me to make an intro series, and I've been thinking about doing that eventually. Well, we'll see. There are parts of the playlist that are more like an intro series than anything. So I'll have to go through the playlist and see if I can reorganize it into some kind of intro series, and then like add the pieces that are missing. Anyway, let's get back to this. I want to see what this looks like though. See, is it done building? Yeah, it looks like it's done building. Alright, so it's really nothing to look at. It's literally just, I can show you guys this. Just a blue bar at the top of the screen that says calculator. That just makes sense. Everything else is just layout. So we'll go back to our browser, or not our browser, our editor. Actually make the logic to print out the numbers. So let's create a function. I guess we'll just call it build button. I'll put this down here. And we'll have this, obviously it'll return a widget, and it'll take in a string, which will be the button text. We'll return an expanded. So, and here's where we want the expanded, because we want the button to fill out the entire area that it's being put into. Child here will be a padding. Give all of them a little bit of padding. We want them to be round, so, or sort of rounded. At least I want them to be sort of rounded. 4.0. This should be capital. Okay. In these childs, we'll have just a raised button. And give them a color orange accent, something like that. Should be colors, by the way. Then I guess we give shape, which will be a rounded rectangle border. Border radius, which would be a border radius object. I guess circular object. And let's make it like 30.0. And then I guess in here, we're also going to need to have the text, which we'll just put in here, and it'll be just the button text. And I guess we'll need like some styling, so text style. And let's make it, so we made the other one 50 pixels, let's make this like 30 pixels. And then we'll have our on pressed, which for now won't do anything. And now we can go up to our rows here and start to add the buttons back in. Or not back in, but start to add them in. So let's see. In the first row, we want, do I have a calculator laying around here? I guess not. All right. I guess it's sort of like a phone. So call build button with string of 7 in it. And this should be inside of its children, of course. Build button, we want to put 8 in here. And we want to put 9 in here as well. I don't know why that's not formatting. Well, let's just do it ourselves. I guess we'll also need the divide key, which will be a backslash like that. Do it like that. I'm just going to copy this. And then for the second row, we'll have 4, 5, 6, and then multiply. Multiply will just have to be an X, like that. We put commas in here. Yeah, actually, there are errors. Let's see, where are those errors? Ah, yes. Got to have semicolon. That's why I wasn't formatting. All right, let's just copy this again. So for this row, we're doing 1, 2, and 3. And I guess we'll do subtract. And then for the next row, we'll do the decimal point, 0. And I guess not sure, but we could have this build button be empty. You know what? Let's have it be 00, because why not? And then we'll have a plus sign here. And then with the final row, we only want 2 buttons. So we'll have a clear button and just say clear like that, and then we'll have an equal sign. And we want these buttons to be rather big. They should scale out because we're using the expanded. See if I can see what this looks like. I don't know if I closed it out or not. That doesn't look too bad. So that's what it's currently looking like. I don't know why it's repeating the buttons. Oh no, it's not. Okay, so yeah, they're just a little flattened. We can make them look a little nicer later, but yeah, for now we've got the basic idea, the basic gist going. So let's go back to our editor and finish this off. So we've got our buttons. Let's now make the logic so that the buttons actually work. So, and actually, before we do that, let's set up init state. I'm going to override this. Of course, have super init state. And what we'll do is we'll take our private output string and set it equal to just 0 like that. And then we'll have let's create a function here called reset state. And that'll be void reset state. And I guess with reset state, we're just going to take num1, set it equal to 0.0, num2, also set it equal to 0.0, and then the operator, set it equal to an empty string. And main reason why I'm putting this in a function is because we're going to want to call it multiple different places, probably. So then, I guess, button pressed will be the name of this function. And we'll pass in the string, which will be the button text. And we can just have a switch statement on the button text, which will then allow us to essentially add cases for each of our button types. So let's start with our clear button, and then we'll have like add, subtract, multiply, all that stuff. Let me just put these in here real quick. All right. And then I guess we'll also have a case for the decimal point, and then a case for the equal sign. And then probably want a default case. This will be the case for all the numbers, essentially. This wants us to put in a break. Oh, forgot that. There we go. Alrighty, so for clear, we'll just call output equals 0 like that, and then we'll call reset state to reset these variables, and then we can call break out of the switch statement, and for plus, minus, multiply, and divide. We want to group all these together. We'll say num1 equals double dot parsed output. So when you click an operator, we want to be able to save whatever's in the actual output into our first number. And we want to say op equals button text, which will be the actual text of the operator. So it'll be the plus, the minus, the x, or the divide. And then we'll just say our private output, we want to set that back to 0 again. Then for the, of course, we want to break. Then for the period, we want to check to see if output, the private output, doesn't contain a dot already. So if it's already a decimal, we don't add another decimal to it, essentially. And this should be contains. Then we'll just say output equals output plus the button text, which is the actual period. So we're just putting this onto our output. And of course we need another break keyword. And then for equal, we'll say num2 equals double dot parse. So when we hit equal, there'll be a number that's in the output, which we can then put into our num2. Then we can call a function called run operation, which we'll make. And then we can call reset state after the operation has been run. And then for default down here, when you just type in a number, we'll just use this here. Actually, I'll repeat this. And then below this switch statement, we want to have a set state call. It just takes the output, takes the private output, parses it into a double, and puts it into our output. And I guess we'll have this toString fixed so that it only has 2 decimal points. And yeah, I guess that's it. So we also need a break here, of course. I hope they make these switch statements a little bit more terse and remove the need to have all these break keywords. All right, so then I guess we'll create our run operation function. And just because this bugs me, I'll put in void here. Now run operation is going to be pretty simple. Again, we'll use another switch statement. And we just want to find out which operation we're running. So we'll say switch on op. And then, of course, we're just looking for these cases here. So let's just grab all these. So in the case of plus, we'll take our output and we'll equal num1 plus num2. We'll then convert that into a string. Put it back into our output. Let me put all the break keywords in here. And all this is just going to be the same logic, just with the appropriate operations. So plus, minus, multiply, and then divide. That's pretty basic, and I think we might be done. Aside from obvious aesthetic changes and stuff like that, this should be fully working. So let's just wire it up. It's just a matter of calling button pressed inside of our on pressed down here, I believe. So for each of the buttons, when you click the button, it calls button pressed with the button text inside of it. And yeah, so I think this should be a workable calculator. Let's reload it and see. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. I think we might be missing something. Let me go in and see. This is a pain. Let me go through this one sec. I know you guys can't see the actual web browser, but I'm not seeing the actual output. It's not being put into our text field here in the way that we want it to be. Let's see, we have our column, padding, edge insets, all right, container, top right, maybe, no, this should be all right. And text style, output, all this should be all right. I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Let me see what happens if I restart all this. While we're doing that, let me look at the rest of it. So then we have our columns with everything else, and this should also be main axis size, should be main axis min. Maybe we should make this symmetric instead. Have vertical be like that, and then horizontal 12.0 like that. Let's make them 12. I don't know. I don't know why this is throwing an error. It's because I spelled it wrong. Oh, still not seeing the text. That is really obnoxious. Let me just put it in manually. See if it pops up. And this is the one disadvantage of, I guess, Flutter Web, is that you can't use the inspector to select widgets, as you could with like the widget tree of the normal Flutter app. So yeah, this is very strange. Let's see. I mean, this should be right. I don't understand what's going on. Very strange. Oh. Yeah, let's change the text color. What am I thinking? Yeah, that was pretty stupid of me. Alright. No, you guys are right. I forgot. Got an entirely white background. I meant to change the theme to dark. That's why I had turned it to a white text. So let me actually do that, and then I'll change it back to a white text. And then I'll actually show you guys what the stuff looks like. So make this white. Thanks, guys. I guess even the quote-unquote amazing programmer derps from time to time, when in reality I'm not really that great of a programmer. I just happen to be a pretty good teacher. Let's see. So 88 times 9, and yeah, of course. So it works. We can clear things, and we can... this is an ugly looking calculator, but you know what? We did this really dirty, so I don't really care. I could fix these buttons, make them look a little bit nicer, but... you know, and in fact, let's do that real quick. I've got a few more minutes here, so it's not a problem. Let's get back to these here. And this probably should be a little smaller. And the orange accent is pretty horrendous. Let's do something else. Maybe like, I don't know, like a blue. Or like blue-gray. I'm not really the most aesthetic person in the world, in case you guys haven't noticed from some of my tutorials. So, I'm technically a full-stack developer, but I'm just not a designer. Alright, so that's a little better. Let me show you guys. There we go. I probably want to make these buttons a little bit taller if I was going to serve it onto an actual web browser like this. Obviously, I'm used to working with Flutter in the scope of like an actual mobile application. And when you have a smaller screen with a different resolution, it's actually easier to work with things like this. With something like this, you know, obviously, it's much more vertical, or not vertical, horizontal than like a phone screen. And so you need to account for that if you're working with Flutter Web, if you want your application to actually look nice. Alright guys, so does anybody have any questions before we close out the stream here? Feel like this was a decent look at Flutter Web. Obviously there are a few other things here that we could look at, but you know, I'm going to save that until the API actually starts to stabilize, so that we don't have to keep making this video over and over and over again. I probably will do some more projects with Flutter Web. Maybe I'll like take some of the existing projects or some projects that I'm working on in normal Flutter and convert them over to Flutter Web and see what they look like in that capacity. And of course I'll show you guys that as we're doing it. Well, you guys are awfully quiet. I guess no one has any questions. I was here late. How do you test the page? What do you mean test the page? You mean like actually bring it up? just like any other web development, you get a localhost port. You can go there and you can actually look at your page. Though if you're using Visual Studio Code, and presumably if you're using IntelliJ and if you're using Android Studio, you can just use F5 like you would with a normal Flutter app, and it will open up a browser for you. Debugging isn't that hard. Actually, if you use the debugger, which I could open up here. Hang on, hit the wrong buttons. Debugger, let's see. Was it the debugger? Yeah, where's the debugger? I guess it's Dart Debugger. Hang on. This is kind of pain because I've got to start it as a inside of VS Code and then do the debugger that way. Yeah. They're called the dev tools, not the debugger. Anyway, so you open the dev tools, and you can actually do this with any Flutter app, and it allows you to like view like the widget tree and all that stuff. Here we go. Let me bring this over to the browser here. So normally this would open up in Chrome or whatever your default browser is. Apparently it doesn't work on Firefox, which is fantastic. Let me just open up a Chrome window so you guys can see, or not a Chrome window, yeah, a Chrome window, so you guys can see this. Second, anyway. All right, so here we are. So you can see here you've got your widget tree, and you can go through it. And you can do this with any Flutter app, even if it's inside of like an Android emulator or like an iOS simulator. So I can see here that I've got, you know, all this different stuff that's being worked towards to build our calculator. You can of course refresh the tree as you're like messing with things. You can change some of the stuff here. You can look at like the debug paint, which kind of shows you how things are being painted as you're rebuilding the app. So when you actually do that, I don't know if this actually works inside of the web. I haven't tried it yet, but even if it doesn't, they should eventually add it. They've also got this paint baselines, and they allow you to slow down the animations and stuff like that. Again, I'm not sure if any of these features work currently or not. Obviously, you've got a bunch of browser tools that you could also use to profile your application. And when you build it inside of Visual Studio Code, you do get error codes back, which you don't get back inside of the emulator, or the terminal rather, which is, I mean, I am getting error codes, but they're not the same as what you'd expect with a Flutter application. So yeah, debugging is a little bit more difficult than a normal Flutter app, currently at least, but I feel like it's something that will probably change rather drastically as the API sort of settles. Is it Nikhil? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. He says thank you for what I'm doing. Why do I use Visual Studio Code instead of Android Studio? Because Android Studio is a bit I find it to be a bit clunky. I don't particularly like how big it is and how resource intensive it is. Even Visual Studio Code is a little bit clunky for my taste because I'm used to like Emacs, but Emacs doesn't have the best support for Flutter currently, so that's why I don't really use it. And also, obviously, if I'm going to be showing this stuff to people, I want to show them tools that they would be used to. So I use Visual Studio Code instead. Anybody have any last minute questions? All right. So, well, while you guys are thinking of any potential questions, I'll just go through here and do my thing. So all the code that we worked on today, obviously this app that we just built, and then the other app which we modified, I'm going to put into the GitHub repository, which is in the description. So you'll be able to check that out later, probably in like 5-10 minutes after the stream ends. Yeah. I'll also make sure to link the Flutter Web GitHub repository and then the Dart code little write-up in the description so that if you guys rewatch this video, you can actually go and check that stuff out. Integrating Firebase to Flutter Web is not easier because the Firebase plugin that you would use normally in Flutter doesn't work. So you would actually have to ping to the API yourself, which would be a little bit of a pain. There are some Firebase libraries that work for Angular Dart that might be useful also in Flutter Web. Again, I haven't checked any of this stuff out. Yeah, I can show you the final size of the release bundle. Let me go ahead and modify this so that it will actually give us a bundle. So they have a little thing on their on the GitHub that explains how you can set up your PubSpec YAML to produce a fairly optimized build. Let me see if I can find it. All right, so we need to, it's not actually the PubSpec YAML. We need to create what's called a build YAML. So build.yaml file. This is used for the web compilers, and I just copied and pasted this all in here. And so don't want the source maps and want to use O4. Stuff like that. All right. And then let's go ahead and use webdev serve-r. I'm not going to show you the terminal, but I'll let this run. And then we'll see what the size of the actual bundle is at the end. Now, of course, this won't be gzipped. It will be minified though. So I did look before when I briefly built my other animation. It was actually pretty small. The actual file itself was like 20 kilobytes. Now that was just with the debug build, so it was just the file itself, not wrapped up with everything else. So I'm not sure what the entire file will be, but I'm sure it'll be fairly optimized because if they're using Dart2.js, then they've got like tree shaking and a bunch of other graph optimizations built directly into it. Let's see. So this actually crashed. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'll let you guys know more as I figure it out myself. So yeah, I'm just assuming that this is an issue with the API as it is currently. Let's actually remove this, and what I'll do is I'll just use the release compilers and I'll check the size of that. Unoptimized release compilers. Yeah, I know 20 kilobytes would be really good, but I don't really think that that's the actual size. And it looks like this is even crashing on its own, so even without the build.yaml. So something went wrong that I probably need to go through and look at. Let's see, so we've got a build in here. So you can see they make JavaScript of all this stuff. Our app would be the calculator app here. So the JavaScript itself, if I open this in a... JavaScript itself is just 23 kilobytes. This is for our main.dart file. Now, of course, you can see here there are quite a lot of other files being added in here as well. So, obviously when it gets built and minified though, it's there, like I said, they use tree shaking and other stuff to thin down the size of it. I'm just not sure how big it's going to be currently. Let's see if I can just run it normally, and then if that works I can try and run it with release again. Kind of want to get you this answer, but if I can't, then I can't. It does seem like everything is sort of served as JavaScript, which is kind of cool. I mean, you're just serving a tiny piece of HTML, and then the rest is all JavaScript. So it's just a matter of optimizing that JavaScript, which of course you can take the outputted JavaScript and run any kind of optimization that you would normally run with any other piece of JavaScript on it. So you could minify it, you could gzip it, you could do all that stuff. So, you know, anything that you have in Node, you have access to in Node.js, you could probably use in this as well. Has anybody got any other quick questions before I close out? Yeah, it is alpha software. Of course, it's not going to be stable. I mean, it's not even, I don't even think they consider it to be alpha yet. It's literally just a tech, tech preview build. So, but given how much, you know, I got to say, I'm pretty impressed with this build as it is, for what it is. And I'm also pretty impressed with the amount of work that the Dart 2JS team has done on their previous projects like Angular Dart and some of the other web frameworks. Like back when they had like Polymer, it was actually pretty efficient. So I don't really have a doubt that Flutter Web will not be efficient, or that Hummingbird will not be efficient when they actually go to release it. So I don't think you need to worry about it so much. Let me throw this into Google Translate. Now, I'm not really sure what you're saying, man. Again, I don't really speak Arabic. Alright guys, well I guess I'm going to close out now, but I hope you enjoyed this live stream and just this first impressions, first look at Flutter Web. I'll be doing more on it obviously as the API stabilizes more and more. Hopefully that's sooner rather than later, but who knows, you know, you never know. You know, it actually just occurred to me that this is probably crashing because I was already running it inside of Visual Studio Code. So let's see. Really quickly, I'm going to run it with the release compiler again. Now it's not actually crashing. So I can actually take a look and see what the actual generated code looks like. Oh, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you guys coming in here, asking the questions, driving the conversation, you know, checking out my content too. So thank you, Neelish, Saul, Ongala. Sorry if I butchered that. Zahar, I'm not even gonna try, sorry. Pest Huff, and of course anybody else who's in this chat, Santiago, Nikhil, I think. God, all these European names and Arabic names, I'm butchering the shit out of them. All right, so I think this generated, let's see. So generated the application. Let's see if I can find. So I think this is the full file. So this is the actual file that gets served with the JavaScript. It is currently at 800 kilobytes in size. And let's see. It looks like it is not entirely minified. I mean, it's obviously minified, but you could minify it further, and you could probably apply some other stuff to it. So there you go. It's about 800 kilobytes in size. And that's just with the out-of-the-box release compiler. So I'm pretty sure they can do a lot to make that even smaller. Alright guys, well, yeah, that's it for today's stream, and hopefully I'll get another one out before the week's done. I'll talk to you guys later. Yeah, Pest Huff, I think they will get it down. Like I said, you know, there's a lot of optimization here that they can do. Pulling out little pieces that you don't need, all that stuff. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later.